My name is Lauren. I am 33 years old, and my parents decided their 40th wedding anniversary dinner was the perfect time to publicly discard me. When my father raised his glass in a crowded luxury restaurant to announce an all-expenses-paid family trip to Aspen, everyone cheered. But when I asked what time our flight departed, he looked me dead in the eyes and said I was not invited, and my only job was to stay behind and babysit my sister's kids. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. The crystal chandeliers of the signature room in Chicago cast a warm, expensive glow over our private dining area. We were gathered around a long mahogany table to celebrate my parents, Robert and Cynthia, and their 40 years of marriage. At the head of the table sat my father, holding court with his usual booming authority. My mother sat beside him, dripping in diamonds. Across from me sat my younger sister Megan and her husband Tyler. They were the golden couple, constantly praised, infinitely accommodated, and the absolute center of my parents' universe. I sat quietly at the far end, wearing a simple tailored dress, playing my usual role as the invisible background character. When the dessert plates were cleared, Robert stood up and clinked his crystal wine glass with a silver spoon. He smoothed the lapels of his custom suit and smiled broadly. He announced that to celebrate their anniversary and to honor the incredible success of Tyler's new wellness clinic expansion, he was taking the family on a 2-week ski vacation. They had booked a private luxury chalet in Aspen, Colorado. The table erupted in cheers. Megan clapped her hands, leaning over to kiss Tyler. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I pulled out my phone, opening my calendar to check my schedule. I asked what time our flight left, mentioning I just needed to coordinate my paid time off with my office. The warm atmosphere in the room evaporated instantly. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. My father lowered his glass, his eyes devoid of any parental affection. He coldly stated that I was not invited. He told me I was just a background character in this family, and my only purpose that week was to stay in Chicago, babysit Megan's 3 toddlers, and install a new security system at their estate so they could monitor their property. Before I could even process the sheer cruelty of his words, Tyler leaned forward. He smirked, deliberately adjusting the $40,000 Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. He mocked my boring government job, laughing that my sad single life made me the perfect candidate for unpaid childcare. You might wonder why I did not scream, why I did not flip the table and walk out. It is a psychological trap called learned helplessness. When you spend your entire life being conditioned to accept the role of the lesser child, enduring abuse becomes your default survival mechanism. It is an invisible chain that keeps you paralyzed, convincing you that fighting back will only make the pain worse. I had spent 33 years swallowing my pride to survive them, but they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. They saw a lonely, obedient spinster. They did not know I was a senior Medicare fraud auditor. I looked directly into Tyler's eyes, offering a calm, dead-eyed smile, and agreed to stay behind. I was done being their victim. It was time to become the hunter. The morning sun had barely crested the Chicago skyline when the aggressive pounding on my apartment door began. I opened it to find my mother, Cynthia, standing in the narrow hallway. She wore a pristine designer coat and a scowl that deepened the moment she saw my modest living room. Without a word of greeting, she shoved 2 heavy boxes of security cameras and a router into my chest. She demanded I head over to the estate immediately to get them installed and fully operational before their flight to Aspen. She sighed, rolling her eyes as she looked at my practical furniture, telling me that since I just sat at a desk staring at screens for my boring little government job, I should at least know how to plug in a few wires. I just smiled, keeping my voice perfectly level, and told her I would get it done. An hour later, I pulled my practical sedan through the massive wrought iron gates of my parents' $3 million Chicago estate. The sprawling property was a monument to their obsession with wealth and status. I let myself in and walked directly into my father's lavish home office, dropping my bag onto his massive oak desk. The house was dead quiet. They wanted to monitor me while they drank champagne in the mountains. I decided it was time I monitored them. I unboxed the equipment methodically, my mind shifting out of the obedient daughter persona and into its analytical state. Instead of a simple consumer-grade setup, I reached into my bag and pulled out a specialized decrypted flash drive. I physically plugged it directly into Robert's primary local area network port. He had set up a wireless network, but his security was an absolute joke. His administrative password was simply Megan 1993. Using his golden child's birth year was a rookie mistake that made my professional skin crawl. I loaded a custom packet sniffer and bypassed his basic factory settings in seconds, establishing total administrative control over his entire digital footprint. I routed the camera feeds to their cloud storage, perfectly fulfilling my mother's insulting errand. But before logging out, my trained eye caught something out of place on his main desktop. Buried deep within a subfolder was a directory labeled Snow Removal Invoices 2023. A normal person would have scrolled right past it, assuming it was just seasonal maintenance records. But I was an auditor. I recognized a hastily hidden directory when I saw one. It was protected by a basic encryption protocol that took my federal auditing software under 60 seconds to completely dismantle. I clicked the folder open, and my heart began to pound against my ribs. These were not landscaping bills. Rows of highly detailed financial records, offshore bank routing numbers, and scanned corporate documents flooded my monitor. I was no longer a daughter standing in her childhood home. I was an investigator staring at a massive financial anomaly. I opened the first spreadsheet and followed an intricate money trail. My father was moving massive sums of money away from his domestic accounts. I traced the encrypted routing codes across international borders, finding continuous wire transfers, linking Tyler's highly publicized wellness clinics directly to a private shell company located in the Cayman Islands. Tyler had spent the last 2 years bragging to everyone in Chicago about his revolutionary healthcare empire. My parents constantly paraded him around their country club as the ultimate visionary founder, using his fake wealth to justify their constant humiliation of my modest lifestyle. I pulled his corporate tax identification numbers from the hidden folder and ran them through my secure federal database. The system processed the raw data and generated a comprehensive report. I stared at the final numbers on the bright screen, feeling a cold wave of genuine alarm. Tyler's clinics had $0 in actual patient revenue. His company had never treated a single patient. It was nothing more than a hollow shell existing only on paper. I checked the liability column, and the reality was far worse. Tyler had taken out $4 million in high-interest loans from predatory lenders. He was secretly drowning in compounding corporate debt, and his fake empire was teetering on the very edge of total collapse. I sat frozen in my father's heavy leather chair as the reality of the hidden files washed over me. The initial shock quickly morphed into a hyper-focused state of mind. I cross-referenced the massive loan payouts against the incoming deposits on Tyler's corporate ledgers. The dates and amounts matched perfectly down to the very last cent. My parents had been quietly paying off his minimum monthly balances to keep the predatory lenders from breaking his legs. But they certainly did not have this kind of liquid cash simply sitting around. I followed the intricate money trail, tracing the funds back to a highly secured trust account. When I bypassed the final firewall and opened the establishing documents, my breath caught in my throat. The trust fund belonged entirely to me. It had been established decades ago by my late Grandpa Harrison. It was a staggering amount of wealth meant to secure my future, but I had never seen a single penny. When I turned 18, my parents sat me down in this exact room, putting on their most convincing masks of sorrow. They told me Grandpa Harrison's investments were tied to the housing market, and the entire trust had gone completely bankrupt during the 2008 financial crash. They told me I had to figure out my own college tuition, forcing me to take out massive student loans that I was still aggressively paying off. They had sacrificed my youth, my peace of mind, and my financial security just to secretly fund my brother-in-law's fake millionaire lifestyle. Suddenly, an automated alert flashed across my screen. It was a live, high-priority email arriving on my father's bypassed network. I opened the message and found a massive legal document attached. It was from a ruthless, hard money lender based in Denver. The email demanded an immediate $2.5 million lump sum payment by Friday, or they would initiate hostile asset seizures and pursue criminal wire fraud charges against Tyler. My parents were backed into a corner, and my father was preparing to execute a catastrophic financial maneuver to save his golden son-in-law from a federal prison cell. I opened the attached PDF file. My father was attempting to place a massive, predatory commercial lien against Grandpa Harrison's pristine downtown Chicago medical clinic. The clinic was the final untouched asset in the portfolio, appreciating in value for decades, and it legally belonged entirely to me. If this loan went into default, I would be chained to a $2.5 million anchor that would drown my entire future. I frantically searched the server for the legal verification documents that allowed my father to authorize this theft. I extracted a scanned copy of a power of attorney. It granted Robert unrestricted administrative access to liquidate my investments. At the bottom of the page, right next to the notary stamp, was a flawless forgery of my 18-year-old signature. My father was a felon masquerading as a successful businessman. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with terrifying clarity. The grand announcement at the anniversary dinner was a massive, elaborate smokescreen. My parents were not flying the family to a luxury resort in Aspen just to celebrate 40 years of marriage. They were flying to Colorado because this wasn't a standard bank loan. This was a ruthless, underground hard money lender. When dealing with a stolen $2.5 million commercial asset, these predators do not leave digital paper trails with standard e-signatures or online notaries. They demand physical, wet signatures and thumbprints in front of their own corrupt in-house notary to make the fraudulent lien completely ironclad. They were flying out in 72 hours to physically hand over my clinic and leave me to drown in the debt. I mirrored the entire directory to my encrypted drive, wiped my digital footprint from the router, and pulled out my secondary secure phone. I did not call the local police. They would take weeks to investigate a complex offshore web. I needed a shark. I dialed my federal fraud attorney, Victor Grant. I told him I had a massive case of wire fraud and forged power of attorney, and I needed an emergency federal injunction executed within exactly 48 hours. 72 hours later, the morning air was thick with impending justice. I stood on my apartment porch, projecting an aura of complete submission, and cheerfully waved goodbye as Megan and Tyler dropped off their 3 children. I watched them speed off toward O'Hare International Airport in their stolen Porsche, completely unaware they were driving straight into a meticulously planned trap. The moment their taillights vanished, the submissive aunt persona evaporated. I walked back inside, picked up the insulting, micromanaged 10-page chore list Tyler had aggressively shoved into my chest, and fed it directly into my kitchen shredder. I refused to let my innocent nieces and nephews suffer for the sins of their greedy parents. I handed the excited kids their VIP indoor water park passes for later, leaving them in the capable hands of Anna and Maria, 2 elite, fully bonded professional nannies I had hired using my own legitimate money. Knowing I had to beat their stolen Porsche to the airport, I quickly shed my plain, oversized sweater. I slipped into a crisp silk blouse and a sharp, tailored charcoal blazer that fit me perfectly. I was no longer the family scapegoat. I was a lethal corporate executioner. I grabbed my car keys, taking the express tollway, and pulled up the location of the AirTag I had discreetly slipped into my mother's designer coat pocket earlier that morning. My secure phone rang, filling the car with Victor's raspy, satisfied voice. He confirmed that the federal judge had signed the emergency ex parte injunction. The digital guillotine had dropped. Every single domestic and offshore account linked to Robert and Tyler was instantly frozen by federal authorities. Their credit lines were severed, and their fake empire was wiped off the financial map. I parked my car, bought a fully refundable first-class ticket on my phone to get past TSA, and strode through the terminal. I walked up to the frosted glass doors of the elite first-class lounge exactly at the right moment. Inside, Tyler was flashing his heavy watch, tossing his elite metal black card onto the marble reception counter to pay for an upgrade. The machine emitted a sharp error beep. The concierge politely informed him that the card was declined due to a severe federal freeze. My mother immediately shoved her card forward, but it was declined too. Tyler tried to laugh it off, blaming it on a pathetic amateur clerical error, frantically patting his custom suit for his phone. I stepped seamlessly into the reception area, my heels clicking with authority. I looked at his smug face and loudly announced to the entire lounge that he did not have an accounting team. I cornered him in front of dozens of wealthy travelers, my voice crystal clear as I exposed his fake empire. I told him his highly publicized clinics had zero revenue and that he was secretly drowning in a $4 million debt to predatory lenders. The confident smirk on Tyler's face twitched, then violently shattered. The heavy silence in the first-class lounge was deafening. My father stared at the documents, his jaw slack, the booming, intimidating authority he'd wielded my entire life completely vanishing. "Did you really think," I said, my voice eerily calm and carrying across the quiet room, "that a senior Medicare fraud auditor wouldn't notice a flawless forgery on a $2.5 million commercial lien?" Megan, clutching her designer handbag, pushed forward, her voice shrill with panic. "Lauren, what is this? What did you do to Tyler's cards?" "I didn't do anything, Megan. I just stopped letting Dad drain my stolen trust fund to pay for your husband's illusions." Tyler lunged forward, his face twisted in rage, but Robert threw a trembling arm out to stop him. My father's eyes darted frantically around the room, realizing the wealthy audience he so desperately wanted to impress was now witnessing his absolute ruin in real time. "We can fix this, Lauren," Robert whispered, his voice cracking. "We're family. You don't understand the pressure." "I understand perfectly." I cut him off, my voice turning to ice. "I understand that this Aspen vacation was a smokescreen so you could fly to Denver, sign physical documents, and steal Grandpa Harrison's medical clinic right out from under me. You were going to anchor me to Tyler's sinking ship and leave me to drown." At that exact moment, the frosted glass doors of the lounge slid open. Airport security hadn't arrived to arrest me for harassment. Instead, 3 plainclothes FBI agents walked in with a very different agenda. Victor had moved faster than I could have ever hoped. When hard evidence of an imminent multi-million-dollar property theft meets an active flight risk, federal judges do not hesitate. The lead agent approached, flashing his badge. "Robert and Tyler, we are executing an emergency federal asset freeze and a court-ordered travel ban. We have substantial evidence regarding the imminent fraudulent transfer of a commercial medical property across state lines. You are both officially considered flight risks and are being detained for immediate questioning." Tyler tried to run. It was a pathetic, split-second decision. He made it exactly 3 steps toward the buffet before an agent tackled him into a display of artisanal cheeses, his $40,000 watch scraping violently against the marble floor. My father didn't fight. He just held out his trembling hands, suddenly looking like a deflated, broken old man, realizing he wasn't getting on any plane today. Cynthia screamed, dropping to her knees, while Megan sobbed uncontrollably, demanding to know how she was supposed to get a cab home without an active credit card. I looked down at them, the people who had spent 33 years making me feel like a disposable background character in my own life. In psychology, there is a concept known as narcissistic injury. When people who build their entire existence on a false sense of superiority and material wealth are suddenly exposed, they don't just feel embarrassment, their entire reality collapses. Without their stolen money to act as a shield, they had no identity left. Their status was nothing but a rented costume, and I had just repossessed it. I didn't offer them a ride. I turned on my heel, walked out of the lounge, and breathed in the purest, lightest air I had ever tasted. 6 months later, the fallout was swift and absolute. My father was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for forgery and embezzlement. Tyler got 10 years for wire fraud and defrauding predatory lenders. Unable to pay the court-ordered restitution or their massive legal fees, my mother and Megan were forced to liquidate everything. The $3 million estate, the stolen Porsche, the diamonds all seized and auctioned off. They now share a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a deeply unglamorous zip code. Megan had to get a job as a receptionist at a local dental office just to make ends meet. As for me, the federal court restored my trust fund entirely. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about the legacy. I took full possession of Grandpa Harrison's pristine downtown medical clinic. But instead of leasing it to a corporate healthcare conglomerate to turn a blind profit, I established the Harrison Foundation for Elder Care. Using my background as a Medicare fraud auditor, I built a facility dedicated to providing honest, affordable, and transparent healthcare for vulnerable seniors, people who are so often scammed and overlooked by men, exactly like my father and Tyler. I even hired Anna and Maria, the elite nannies I'd paid out of pocket on that final day to run the clinic's new, fully funded childcare center for our working staff. Sometimes the greatest liberation isn't about securing an apology. It's about looking at the toxic chains of your bloodline and having the courage to finally cut them. True justice isn't just about watching the people who hurt you destroy themselves. It's the justice of the planter taking the exact tools they used to try and break you and using them to build something beautiful for someone else. My name is Lauren. I am no longer a background character. If my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments below.